Cool. Well, Nathaniel, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me. It's an absolute pleasure. First things first, straightforward. How's your day going?
Good.
Yeah.
As it could be. I'm still alive, so that's great. I woke up today and got out of bed. But yeah, I'm good. Had some breakfast. Went for a little jog, get my heart going. And
Brooklyn, right? New York, yeah?
yeah, I'm kind of based out of Brooklyn. I actually ended up moving to New Jersey last fall due to a housing issue where my ceiling collapsed in July. And my girlfriend and I had drove out west to go check out Yellowstone and just kind of get the fuck out of Brooklyn. And like take some space.
Yeah.
Which was surreal to say the least, between politics and pandemic, of driving across America.
Oh, for sure.
It was one of those things where, like, as soon as we left the absolute liberal bubble, pandemic wise and politically, of New York City and started going west, and we're both from the Midwest, like from Detroit originally, driving across the country was just like, oh my God, should we have even done this?
Oh, really?
But at the same time, I look at it, it's like, what a great time to travel, to go see not just where you're at, and see how the country is operating during probably the biggest, at least direct health crisis that's ever affected the country during our lifetime.
Oh, for sure.
See how the rest of the country's working versus just watching it on TV through a filtered lens of whoever wants to portray it whatever way they want to,
Yeah, of course. We're two different countries here, so whatever you hear about the UK, you're going to get through a lens of media. And likewise, what we hear, from our perspective, what we hear about the US and so on is you're on fire, basically, and no one knows how to put you out, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's not totally wrong. I think potentially a good fire that, some of it needs to get burned out. But the long answer to your question is, yeah, ceiling collapse, moved to New Jersey, live in the burbs. It's great because, we have doors in our house. So like we can go in separate rooms and stuff now.
Oh, that's good. That's good. And I mean, you brought it up already, I suppose. And aside from ceiling collapse and moving and all that, how have you been holding up during this entire pandemic period? What is now over a year's worth of restrictions and so on?
Do you want my public relation answer or my honest answer?
Well, you tell me, which one do you want to keep in the video?
I fucking love it, to be honest with you. I mean, let me preface it by, I think where we're at globally, especially, again, I can only speak for my country, but having friends that live all over the world, it's been very fascinating talking to like people's experiences and based on how the government's handling, how the people around them are handling. I think for you and I and those of us that aren't relying on a cult or a religion or any sort of group to give us hope, our fetishism is music, right? That's why we're talking right now. Music, art, whatever. Relying on that to get you through has been something very fascinating to me. But part of that is also, as an adult, how do you just sit down and be like, okay, I have to adapt to this situation. Does that mean I can't go take pictures of bands or play music? Yeah, that means I can't do that. I don't know how long. So rather than sitting around and crying about that, I'm going to pour my time into other things. So for me personally, and I can only speak about me, and this is something I've struggled with kind of in the last year, given that I don't have children, but have plenty of friends that do. I am fortunate to have worked hard in my life to get to where I'm at now, that has provided me a very kind of comfortable way of dealing with a lot of this stuff. Again, also, like, I don't really have any responsibilities other than to my girlfriend and making sure I stay alive. That the last year has provided me with a blank canvas to just go buck wild and wake up every day and be like, okay, so today, because I don't have to go to work, I don't have to be concerned about the rat race of getting ahead, because we're all kind of in that same even playing field. I just have devoted the last year to like being as creative as possible, because not only does it give me something to be proud of when I'm on the other side of all of this, but it also keeps my head straight of not just wallowing in like the what if, and when if things are gonna like be normal again. Shit's never gonna be normal again. Um, but what do you do with that? You move forward and you adapt. That's not so easy for everybody. I just am extremely grateful. I, in recent years, have gotten to a mental stasis of accepting that I have to keep moving forward versus like wallowing in the past, which I admit was something that I kind of struggled with for a majority of my life. That it's a waste of time to sit around and cry versus like go outside. What do you have the opportunity to do right now that you've never had? Because, and I only speak for like people who don't have jobs, you know, like obviously like a lot of people are still working from home, and it kind of sucks, kids, whatever, I get all that. But like you have the opportunity to leave your house and just go check out the world and through a different view, like why would you not take advantage of that? So I, you know, my bias of all of this is like I've spent the year recording music, painting, exploring every idea that kind of has popped in my head because I've had the time to do that. And I really have tried to use the last year to be as proactive and productive as possible because I kind of think it's a gift in a certain way to take a step back and like evaluate what's important. You know, if I didn't have to go to work every day because I had a financial means to just frankly fuck off and do whatever I wanted, how would I spend my time doing that? Would I just like, you know, smoke weed and watch movies all day? No, like, I mean, that's boring to me. Well, I love enjoying that, but like there is a boundless world that I can go take pictures of or songs I can write or like, you know, I just tried to be as proactive as possible.
You're a rare person in this sort of conversation because most of the time it is a conversation based around the restrictions and the effect it's had on whether it be mentality, but on a professional side of things, when you're a musician, the effect it's obviously had on that side of things.
Sure.
In that regards, on the professional side of things, when it comes to your music, have you noticed a massive change in how you're pushing yourself out there?
I think musically and artistically, you know, I've been photographing music for over 20 years. Dabbled in painting, dabbled in writing, but you know, that's turned into another way to make some money and create art. Is, you know, I've been painting a lot, been doing these like weird alien stained glass paintings, and people like them, and I've been able to sell them on the internet and make some cash, which is cool. But you know, to get to your question, I'm totally spacing out. I just totally lost track of that.
So when it comes to basically Nathanial Shannon and the Vanishing Twin, that specific block there, how has it affected the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, I've been able to promote myself and dedicate more time to that in the last year than I ever have because of maybe I'm not tired because I have to go to work, or I'm not tired because of this. I have nothing to do besides be like, hey man, or not man, hey people out there, check out what I'm doing because you don't have anything to do either. So, you know, you might as well spend some time and not just tell me you're going to check me out, but actually do it. Not being able to play shows is a bummer, but like I enjoy playing live, you know, like don't get me wrong, but I really enjoy like writing and the problem solving that comes with like piecing together recording, and especially doing that a majority of the time remotely from home to begin with, and then now having to do that hasn't been any sort of a change for me. But it's just given me more time to like sit and kind of tinker, which is kind of, I don't know. I hate to be like, I don't want the world to ever go back because I love this. I don't want to come across that way, but like I secretly, I kind of love all like having to not feel like I'm competing ever, and I can just like make stuff and be like, here you go, you into it? No? Okay, cool. Maybe next time.
I get it. It's a bit of an awkward one, isn't it? Because you know, there's so much negativity surrounding it that you kind of the positive stories that might come out of it, be it, and you hear it all the time, particularly when we do interviews. Even if we're talking with bands who are regularly on the road, regularly and rely heavily on that, have praised the fact that maybe they've had an extra 3 months to sit down and spend longer on an album, spend longer doing this and doing that. And there are these positives, but you almost feel guilty about saying those.
Yeah, I don't rely on touring to make money.
Of
So
course.
I'm not as, I guess, what I would consider to be as serious about music as people who are professionally touring, which I have a lot of friends of who I've had conversations with that run the gamut of life sucks, I don't want to do this anymore, to I kind of feel guilty, as you were saying, because now I have way more time to tinker with what I'm doing.
Mm.
And it's been kind of an interesting break to just put what was going to be on pause and now turn it into what will be by crafting a new thing.
Mm.
I think we're already starting to see a lot of people's quarantine records and projects being released that are of varying quality, of course, as music always is, but there's a lot of really cool shit starting to come out. And I think it's because people who had like maybe, you know, 60% of a great idea are now having like a 90% of a great idea because they've had time to tinker with stuff.
Yeah, modern technology really helps as well. The amount of lockdown projects we've seen kind of prop up, not long-term things, but just a couple of different band members getting together and remotely creating an EP and throwing it out there. We've seen so much of that in the last year,
which is awesome. You know, I mean, my take on like the pandemic, especially, it's like, as much as things suck, imagine trying to do with this like 20 years ago. When would it, well, let me rephrase that a little bit. Where would be where we are globally with the conspiratorial issues if this was 20 years ago? Arguably not, but for entertainment purposes of like creativity, living in the future currently is kind of, I think, lended itself to be a very productive thing for a lot of people if they choose to go that route. You know?
Yeah, we've got we can slam the streaming services and the YouTubes and all that, but without them at the moment, would be in a bit of a mess in regards to music.
For example, my buddy Bill Saunders, who's an old Detroit homie, he was in a fantastic band called the Nan Rouge, which everybody should check out. Very Dead Guy influenced. He and I actually had started in the fall of 2019 working on producing a documentary about the band Dead Guy of New Jersey, America. And we had a handful of interviews lined up, and it was going to be, you know, like not a full length thing, but just kind of like a quick biopic, and with the band's blessing specifically. And, you know, we got a couple interviews under our belt and had these grandiose ideas. And then the pandemic hit, and we were forced with, well, how do we continue making a music documentary when we can't go talk to the people who are going to be in the music documentary? And we learned really quickly that like Zoom was, what's up, Zoom? You want to sponsor me? Or my friend Carl here. What a great tool of taking what would be a 30-minute project and now is going to end up being a full-length film, because we could talk to people from all over the world about the subject matter and we didn't have to go to them. I specifically was slightly concerned with what the quality of that would be as far as like video and audio interviews. But years ago, the Melvins released, or somebody made a documentary about the Melvins, which I still don't know if like that's publicly available, but I went to a streaming of it. And what was so cool about it, was that it was like the most punk rock documentary I've ever seen, of like VHS footage, cell phone interviews. It looked like garbage, but it fit the vibe and the ethos of that band being the most DIY touring band ever. It fit them perfectly. So when back to the Dead Guy thing, we kind of had the same conversation with like doing the Zoom thing aesthetically, I think fits what that band was so much, and what a kind of cool time capsule of where we're at right now as a society, dealing with how we reevaluate how we communicate. Did
Yeah.
you happen to see I know like you're a horror buff too. Did you happen to see the movie Host?
Oh, Host, the Zoom only horror movie,
Yeah.
about 70 minutes long on Shudder. That's right.
It's like an hour. It's like a full-length movie.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
I thought that I mean, I love found footage movies to begin with because I think a lot of them are redundant and kind of terrible. Like, what a cool canvas to play with as far as like there are way less rules of like what quality has to be just versus like an interesting story. I thought that movie was fantastic simply because you wrote, produced, filmed, and exported a documentary about the pandemic during the pandemic.
It was very clever.
And I thought, just like, what a cool idea. Does that have to be like the most amazing thing? No, but like, what a cool time capsule for the period. But like that execution of like a Zoom haunting, if you will, 3 years ago, like would have been like, who gives a shit about this?
Yeah,
Like,
that's pretty absurd.
I don't have the understanding of this environment to like make this be like, oh shit, that's real. What if like while you were talking to me right now, something just like floated beyond my head, like how creepy that would be, you know? So I think that there's a lot of cool stuff being made based around where we're at.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to sort of see what happens over the next the remainder of the year, really, as countries and so on begin to sort of come out of lockdowns and potentially get back to normal. We shall see. Watch that space. So you give us a little bit of history in regards to your musical path and what led to the creation of Nathanial Shannon and the Vanishing Twin.
I've always played music.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I grew up outside of Detroit, Michigan, originally, in the suburbs, and got sucked into the local music scenes as a teenager. Was fortunate enough to have my camera with me. Started shooting bands real early on in my life. Shooting film, running around Detroit, doing hood rat shit, and it played in various incarnations of, I guess, kind of more aggressive music. Super Ink and Dagger, Drive Like Jehu fan, and Botch, you know, like all that stuff. Really wanted to like kind of rip that off, and none of those really worked out. And over the years, it just, you know, my songwriting styles changed based on influences, and I kind of based on being at home. It's a lot harder to write aggressive music when it's just you by yourself.
True.
And not only the energy you feed off of other people, but just like limitations of you know, my rhythm is terrible, so like if I'm gonna play fast aggressive music, it's nice to have like somebody keeping time for me. So I would say about 12 years ago, what became this Vanishing Twin type project kind of started to birth itself out of, I moved to New York City, and ended up, my girlfriend at the time was a soul singer, and she had like a Tascam digital 8-track, and I just kind of started recording these song skeletons that were influenced by a different array of audio sounds that I really appreciated. And just kind of started experimenting with that. I didn't really have any interest in pursuing that beyond just like a bedroom recording. But Jonathan and Eric from Akko and Lamb, who are old friends of mine that I met when I kind of first moved to New York City, had started the label, and they were really encouraging and trying to push me to like do something with these, like, I guess, folkish, creepy, like folk songs.
Yeah.
And it's just, I kind of fell into like a songwriting niche of like, the more I did it, the more I understood how that world could operate for me, or I could operate that world of songwriting, that has just kind of taken me in this different path that I didn't really ever have any interest necessarily in pursuing outside of self-fulfilling like getting these ideas out of my head. And what I really like about where this has taken me is there is a lot of influence of different genres that don't necessarily fit what I'm doing that I try to incorporate. I was fixated on like 90s hip hop as a kid, as well as, the grunge explosion and, liking Metallica and like whatever, there was just like this melting pot that I'd never really grown out of where I grew up in Detroit. There was a radio station in Canada called 89X that was like right across the river from Detroit, and they were essentially a college radio station with like major broadband span. And there was like a huge music explosion in Canada in the 90s that was played to us on the radio. On top of like, I would hear the Catherine Wheel on the radio like regularly, like all 8 minutes of Black Metallic just on the radio. That was like normal to me growing up. I didn't realize that the rest of the country didn't have that experience where it's like, you'd hear Maiden and then the Catherine Wheel back to back, and then some Canadian bands all mixed together. So like I got super into English shoegaze and Canadian, I guess, shoegaze influenced alternative rock in the early 90s at a really young age. And that had a huge impact, I think, even to what I'm doing. I mean, I admittedly, my biggest influences, I think, for the Vanishing Twin project are the Catherine Wheel, Cult of Luna, and Mark Lanigan.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that last Cult of Luna, I get. That last one, whoa. Okay, no.
Well, I loved the Screaming Trees as a kid, and then Lanigan started doing his solo stuff, which I think is just, I think he's one of the best crooners of our generation. And I'm never going to be that good of a singer, but I loved the pop sensibility of what he was doing in minor keys, mixed with the atmosphere of the Catherine Wheel, mixed with, especially being fortunate to grow up in Detroit, like the influence of like Jay Dilla and like Detroit hip hop, mixed with, like I think The Chronic by Dr. Dre was a formative record for me of my introduction to like G-funk hip hop, which has played a huge influence on like the way I think about songwriting as far as like being loops, so it's like this weird melting pot of all these things coming together, and through me and like my sentiment and personality crapped out into this, I don't know, like weird creepy little thing that I still don't personally know how to describe what I'm doing, other than it's just in a weird way like probably the most honest thing I've ever made, because it's just, this is purely a stream of consciousness of like my love of all these different genres of music kind of pressed together.
Yeah, I love the fact that you say yourself, it's not easy. This is not something you can pigeonhole. And one of the most intriguing things I read regarding yourself while looking around, and it was these words: pondering what heavy music would be like if it wasn't heavy. Do you remember saying that or writing that?
Yeah.
I love that statement. And to me, that's a really good summation. Perhaps if you needed, someone said to me, how do you describe this? I think I would use that statement, so to speak. Heavy music without necessarily being what you think heavy music is. Is that your kind of way of summarizing it?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I'm a big fan of juxtapositions in everything that I do. And taking metal ideas, be it lyrical content or even song structures, and applying them through not playing them. Like, I don't need to scream at you about murder or true crime or ghosts or aliens or like whatever I want to write about, or like personal experience. I don't need to scream that at you.
No.
But I can take how that's written and delivered and kind of change it into this less aggressive format of, I don't I never really had any interest in playing metal.
Yeah.
Though, like, I'm a super fan of it, love photographing it, never really had any interest in playing it, but I can take the ideas of what that is and just do something different with it. Which has kind of been a big goal once I took this songwriting project a little more seriously. It's a big goal of like, how do I take like my love of the undying love of the Friday the 13th franchise, even Jason Takes Manhattan, which I think is my favorite. It's my favorite out of the whole movies, even though it's like totally a garbage ass movie. But like, how do I take that and apply it through me not screaming that at you, but like singing these weird folk songs that you may not necessarily realize that that's what those songs are about, you know?
Well, those inspirations as well, because we'll talk about the three mothers now. Released Halloween 2020, obviously inspired by Argento's Three Mothers trilogy: Suspiria, Inferno, and Mother of Tears. Now, that alone there is mind-boggling, because that's a lot of content, a lot of detail to inspire someone. But it's also distilled into 3 tracks. Give us some idea of how you kind of worked, what you wanted to express from those movies into your music.
Sure. I love Argento.
Mm-hmm.
I love, the Italians were just how beautiful all those films are, stylistically.
Yeah.
And I've been a fan of those for, as long as I can remember. And several years ago, again, due to spatial limitations of living in Brooklyn at the time, having a practice space that's a 45-minute on a train ride away, I started experimenting a lot more with doing like MIDI recording, and I just had these like 3 weird soundscapes of loose structures that were like all keyboard. And I frankly like was rewatching Inferno for the whatever millionth time, and it just kind of dawned on me like, oh shit, there's 3 movies. There's 3 movies. I've got these 3 songs, structure soundscapes, if you will, that don't really fit with like the regular thing I was trying to write. So let's just put those together. Each song's a movie. There we go. Super simple. And there's really nothing more to it than that. And it just kind of worked out that ironically, then the Suspiria remake came out. So I think that has brought more attention to those 3 movies, as far as people maybe being a little more aware of them if they weren't before. And it, I think, kind of fits the vibe of those movies. If, to me, especially with like the couple videos we've done for the record, if I close my eyes and listen to those songs, I have a very giallo visual representation of hearing those songs in my head, which I think, had they not been so keyboard heavy in that direction of where they ended up, I don't know if I would feel the same way. But yeah, that's really it. It was just like, let's just make the songs a concept record around that trilogy, because it's a cool story to begin with. I'm not going to pretend that Mother of Tears personally is a good movie, because it's not. But the idea of what the story is supposed to be,
the grander thing is cool.
Conclusion of the trilogy is I just thought was cool. I get obsessed with concepts sometimes more than allows me to actually like finish projects. But I just thought it was like a cool concept for giving some voice to this like voiceless material at the time.
Well, there's no arguing that. It's a very attention-grabbing concept. And horror in general, then, does that serve as a lot of inspiration when it comes to writing?
Yeah, sure. I've always been a true crime nut. My dad was a police officer growing up.
Wow.
I think that I was exposed to a lot of elements of societal deviation at a young age, which has just kind of always been a fascination of, like, why do we love horror movies to begin with? Well, because it's fantasy for a lot of the material, is rooted in fantasy, and it's just fun, in a very adolescent way, and I've never really grown out of that. I don't think a lot of us have that are fans of the genre. That it's just fun, it's exciting, it's scary. So like, why not incorporate those elements into the songwriting too? I think that there's a big complement of the music to even like my own photography work that's like very heavily stylized after horror movies, and appreciating that, you know, you don't have to have everything look slick to like get your emotion and point across of like what you are delivering as a product. In that genre specifically, I think is like there's a lot of wiggle room in there. So that's been like a huge influence, be it storytelling or just song ideas in general.
Is there a particular style of horror that you find you're drawn to the most, or that you enjoy the most? E.g., are you heavy on the supernatural? Do you like your slashers? Is there a particular decade perhaps you go towards?
I'm a big slasher fan. I mean, how many times can you just remake a dude stalking people, trying to kill them for whatever reason, over and over and over again? It's endlessly fascinating to me. 80 slashers, I mean, are without a doubt, I think, my favorite. And there's like an endless bucket of movies that were made during that decade that like I feel like I've seen a lot, countless months and years spent watching those, and like I'm not even like haven't even like broached seeing everything that I could digest from that decade. And I think part of the fascination of that genre specifically to stylizing artwork or storytelling is maybe there's a supernatural element to what that stalker character is, but how did they end up in that position? What happened? Was it forced into a family situation, extraneous trauma? You know, what pushed them to the point to like being that creep? It's kind of always been a fascinating concept to me of psychological people's own psychological development, and like what drives them to get to a certain point.
Okay.
As I mentioned before, I love the found footage genre just because like so much you could do with it. That you know, back to the Host film, and you and I just sitting and talking over Zoom right now. You know, I can see, what do you got, a cat behind you?
Yeah, she's on a chair. That's right. That's a cat.
But what if that wasn't a cat? What if I was just like, oh my God, Carl, what is that behind you?
Oh, dude, I'm home alone.
Do you need a slick production to share that? Like, oh my God, what did I see? You're the one that's now dealing with it. And now we have this relationship based in fear, based on how we communicate in 2021. I think it's just like a really effective way of, you know, I loved the movie Megan is Missing that came out several years ago, because it's just teenage girls who are super annoying the way that they talk to each other over cell phones, the way that they realistically talk to each other. I thought was brilliant and really effective of like, yeah, this is what it's like to be a 15-year-old girl and talk to your 15-year-old girlfriend. Meanwhile, there's this dude in the background that's like lurking you and trying to cut you up and put you in a garbage bin somewhere. I just thought it was like really effective use of like modern technology that is applicable to like everyday communication, you know?
So you've not reached a level as a horror movie fan, you've not reached a cynical level where you feel like you've seen everything done already, and because of that, you're kind of stuck with just the classics rather than moving forward.
I think that there's so much back catalog. I don't see how anybody would get tired of it. You know, I feel the same way about music. You know, my musical tastes have changed over the years, but as they've changed, there's, you know, the 10 or 20 bands of a certain genre that I'll get really into. But then there's the 10 or 20 bands that came before that era, and then before that era, that it's like the amount of material is like endless.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't necessarily keep up as much on like what is current. Obviously, there's like Shudder and a host of other Arrow and like a host of other streaming sites that is cool for that. There's some gems in there, but like back catalog of like all horror or music genres is like it's endless, man. Especially what you actually have access to find without like getting into tape trading and like file sharing of like.
And even then, that just opens up even more doors and windows for you to go to.
So I'm kind of all over the place of, I would just whatever comes in front of me is kind of, I guess, where my interest peak at that point in time.
Well, then the big question has to be, what is your favorite horror movie of all time today?
Today,
Yeah.
I think the movie Pieces is one of my absolute favorite slasher films.
Wow. Yeah.
And again, like I undyingly love the Friday the 13th franchise as far as like more mainstream horror. But I think Pieces is just such a weird movie. I years ago when I was like a teenager into young adult, I worked at in the Midwest and in the States, there's a store chain called Meijer, which is like kind of like Walmart, but like not as trashy. And I worked in the 1 hour photo lab there for a couple years, and they had these like bargain bins of movies where you would have like 3 or 4 movies on like one DVD.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then you could get 3 of those DVDs for like $10. And I acquired a huge stack of those DVDs from working there. And one of the movies on there was Pieces. I think another one on the same DVD was like The Beyond. At the time I got turned on to like Dementia 13 and like Carnival of Souls, which I think Carnival of Souls is also like one of the most beautifully shot, kind of spooky supernatural movies. I just had like access to all these, and I just drink 40s and like watch all these horror movies I acquired. But Pieces is the one that always stuck out to me. I think the gore is great. I love the outline of the killer. That one just always stuck with me and resonated. And it's interesting in like recent years, I think there's a huge resurgence of like respect of that movie, be it like bootleg merchandising on the internet.
Yeah.
Like, I think it was like Rotten Cotton or like, some social media like bootleg site had Pieces shirts. And it was the first time I ever saw like a shirt online. I was like, oh my God, I have to buy all of those just because I've loved this movie since I was a teenager. That I don't really know anybody who ever saw it. And as horror has like exploded in recent years of, again, bootlegging and like reissues of stuff and streaming, that one I've like been super. I mean, even to this day, if like I see a new company that's made like any sort of Pieces merchandise, I always buy it, including the replication of there's a company, Messed Up Puzzles. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Okay.
But they do like puzzles of like horror movie posters. And they did so in Pieces, the beginning of the movies is like, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but little kid like putting together this porno puzzle.
That's right. Yeah.
Mom catches him and he hacks her up with an axe. So they got the original photo that was shot for the movie to make the puzzle, and they recreated the puzzle that the kid's putting together as the movie. And I saw that and was like, that's so cool. Like I can't not own
so
that.
Unique. How clever.
But I love the Friday the 13th stuff. It's just the creepy stalker element of like not knowing who's looking at you through your window, which I think comes from like a childhood fear of like, growing up as a kid in the 80s, there was like a huge scare of like being kidnapped. I feel like as a kid that was just shoved down your throat of like, if you see something, say something to a parent. Like there's kids out there that, there's democratic satanic child molesters everywhere. That I think as an adult led to this like innate fear of like people looking at me through my window.
Even Jason X though, even when he's looking through you in a space station.
Yeah, that movie. I watched that not too long ago. Man, what a piece of shit movie that was.
Oh, it's good fun now. It's good fun. It fun. Knows it's silly.
Yeah. I mean, where else can you take Jason besides space? We got to go to
Absolutely.
space. We didn't get to go to space, you know?
Yeah, and eventually I think all franchises go there. Leprechaun's been in space, Critters have been in
Yeah.
space. The only thing we're missing is maybe, well, Freddy Krueger and Michael Myers.
Garbage Pail Kids came from space, which makes no fucking sense.
Yeah, it's good fun. All right, man. Change tack then. Social media and all that aspect of it, that part and parcel of being a musician and the requirement that you must be always active in some way, posting about yourself, your personal life, and so on. Is this an aspect that you like, or is it one of those where it's a necessary evil and I have to do it to kind of promote my music?
I go back and forth on this so much. There is my buddy Damien, who is in the band As Friends Rust, and he's also got a solo project called Damien Dunn that is in the same wheelhouse as mine. So we bounce a lot of ideas off of each other. We've also done some recording together, but we bounce this idea off of each other constantly. It's a constant conversation of like, what works, what do people pay attention to, what people don't pay attention to, and how much do I actually give a shit about any of this? I don't need the adoration, but it's nice to be patted on the head when I pour a lot of time and energy into making something, and then people respond to it. So the fact that anybody such as yourself even gives a shit about talking to me about it is awesome to me, because I didn't really intend for any of this to go anywhere other than I just had these ideas and I put them on tape, and oh cool, people dig it, awesome. I guess I'll keep doing it. But attaching yourself to a brand or trying to create a brand for social media is, I fucking hate it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's an interesting game of reevaluating and understanding marketing and how to grab people's attention in a world where nobody has an attention span. It's fascinating. I think, again, it would be very easy to be like, I think this is stupid because everybody should just care about things the way I care about it, is a waste of time, versus, okay, nobody cares about anything because they don't have the attention span to care about anything. How do I put myself in front of them for a quick second where they may or may not like something I do, which may lead to them actually listening or looking at something I do?
Yeah.
It's a struggle. I think it's dumb. I'd rather spend my time hiking and like looking at trees and like appreciating being alive, but it's a necessary evil.
Yeah.
At the same time, to deliver content, if you will, to people who are so content driven, which again, I think is an interesting parallel to just like the consumerism culture of globally, like people really are they looking at art because they actually care like what anybody's doing, or because it might lead to some character armor they can repost or buy, or fill a void in their own lives? I don't know why anybody does what they do.
It's an ever-changing world. The algorithms, trying to keep up with it. It's
white people love algorithms. I gotta look this up really quick because I thought that there was this hip-hop dude, and I'm forgetting his name. It's this dude Chris Crack, who is like a newer rapper.
Yeah.
A buddy sent me his record, and like I kind of dug into it. It's cool. There's some cool ideas there, but he put out a record called White People Love Algorithms, which I thought was like the fucking funniest album title, of just like, man, white people really do love algorithms. And I say that as a white guy who like gets obsessed with like, why don't people pay attention to my algorithm? It just makes me laugh like every time I think about it, because you brought it up. Just saying the word algorithm makes me laugh, because I'm like, yeah, I hate to admit that that's totally a thing that we all who are producing anything have to kind of pay attention to.
Yeah, it's the difference between paying attention though and becoming slaves to said algorithm and obsessing over it.
Fair. I try not to obsess over it because that's an endless black hole.
Oh yeah. There's no winning. It'll check because the joke is you'll learn or you'll think you get it, and a month later it'll bloody change.
Yeah. The benefit, though, as I get older and try to be more optimistic about adapting to everything around me, is with the ever-changing algorithm system and fighting for people's attention, does that make you then reevaluate how you create and kind of push you to like be fresh and continually grow? And that's something in the angle I've kind of been thinking about recently of like, okay, I got this music, I did, maybe it worked, maybe it didn't. Here's a series of pictures I took that maybe people responded to, maybe they didn't. Paintings, whatever the medium is. How do I push myself to not just keep doing the same thing over and over again and get out of my own personal creative ruts and try something different? Maybe it's for the appeal of an audience, or maybe it's just like, well, I already did this thing so many times over and over again. Why don't I try something new or deviation of that? Maybe people will respond to it. Even if they don't, I still tried something new and like kept myself adapting as well with my own creative output. I don't know that I would necessarily have as serious of a driving force to like constantly reevaluate and adapt my own uh, uh, creativity if social media didn't exist. So I kind of try and take that as like a positive, like fire under my ass of like continual motion.
Yeah, it's a really, really strong way to put it. Is there something you kind of
that
encourages that creativity?
Yeah, it's also really exhausting and I hate it.
Yeah, there is that. All right, Nathaniel, last question then. What is going on musically with you these days? What do fans have to look forward to? What do you want to talk about that you can talk about or reveal?
So I just put out a 44-page art zine and concept tape with another project I had called Suspects, which was a project I started like 10 years ago. And the story behind this record is that I've been playing with a couple people and I found this notebook of just this random collage art, and I had shown it to the other band members and we kind of started writing these songs around the stuff I had found. And the one band member had gone missing after a camping trip, and he had the only recording of these original records, right? And so that was a situation that just kind of put a big deterrent on moving forward with that project. And last year I unearthed the recordings of the previous gatherings of recording, and you know, I put it all together and we released it a couple of weeks ago, about a month ago. And the project is called Suspects, and it's a zine and cassette tape. The cassette tapes are all sold out, but I still have a handful of copies of the zine. It was limited to 100 copies. Within refining all that tapes too, I had met up with my friend Sean Hain, who is in a band from Detroit called Thoughts Ionesco, that were from the 90s, that were very much in the pre-Dillinger technical metal hardcore crossover. Really fantastic band that never kind of really got a lot of due outside of the Detroit area. And I had approached him and asked him if he would sing on these songs, and he did. So this is much more for fans of like Dead Guy and Snapcase and like 90s coalesce, kind of like, you know, it's kind of to me is like very Dead Guy meets Jesus Lizard, way more aggressive than like my own solo stuff. But people can check that out. I'm super excited and elated to like have that kind of exercise from things that hang over my head of execution. And then as far as like the Vanishing Twin stuff, I've got a 4-song ambient record that I'm working on wrapping up that I plan to release also with an art book of some sort of like accompanying photographs. So it's kind of a soundscape of visual accompaniment to that body of photo work. I'm in the process of recording a full length, doing that remotely with some of the guys that I've been playing with live and like other friends around the country. No idea when that's going to be wrapped up. Hopefully sooner than later. But again, having the pandemic to kind of like work on that Suspects record, work on the ambient record, I can just set aside like, okay, this month, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to spend my free time, is like working on these projects. So I've got the full length. There's also a 90s covers conceptual record of like a couple 90s R&B songs. Like there's going to be an Aaliyah cover on there because I love 90s R&B as well. And just some of, you know, as I mentioned, that Detroit or Canadian radio station earlier that I listened to in Detroit, they just went off the air.
Oh, wow.
Last fall, which I haven't listened to that radio station 20 years because it turned into like new metal, and then that turned into like Stained, and like it just never progressed beyond like 1999. Then there was like the bullshit emo explosion, and like it was trash. But they went off the air recently, and it was emotionally devastating to me in a way where I didn't expect a radio station going off the air that I have not listened to in 20 years, but was so formative to my audio development as a youth. I didn't think I would react to that, but it was like a friend died. Like it was super bummer to like listen to the last song. The very first song they ever played in like 1990 was Jane's Addiction. They ended it with the same song, which is a cool bookend.
Yeah.
Given that, you know, for the last 20 years, it's just been like, oh, cool, you guys are playing the same Red Hot Chili Pepper song in Stain still. It was kind of a bummer. And I started texting with like Trevor from Black Dahlia Murder, old buddy. We grew up, you know, in Detroit together. And we started reminiscing about like, man, there was like Mystery Machine from Canada and Pure from Canada and the Catherine Wheel and this band and that band that we all grew up listening to, even though our paths all went in like all these other directions, that I wanted to take a couple deep cuts from there and like reimagine them through like my songwriting.
Yeah.
Also with like my love of, you know, like Aaliyah and Tony and Bobby Brown and like 90s R&B, like, because I love all that stuff too. And kind of compile them into this like tribute of like, these are songs that don't sound anything like what I'm writing, but had a massive influence on why I play music now. So I'm reimagining them. I have no idea when that's going to be done either, but I'm pretty excited to kind of, it's like kind of my tribute to that, you know, radio station, if you will. Because I think, especially for us growing up in the Detroit area, I mean, the amount of bands of so many different genres, the amount of artists of so many different genres that like really were influenced by this radio station is insane.
Yeah.
We all kind of start talking about it because it was such a cool, unique place to grow up and hear that stuff that, you know, a lot of people in the States just didn't have access to what, you know, besides what was on MTV, or unless you lived in like Los Angeles and New York with like these kind of more independent yet massive radio stations.
Yeah.
It just didn't have access to like, you know, because there was no Spotify, there was no streaming.
Of course.
Where I could be like, here's a list of bands to check out, and you just immediately go do it. It's like, oh, there's this band I heard on the radio last night, and then you just stay glued next to the speaker for days because you want to hear the song that your buddy recommended that may not be like totally terrible.
Yeah. So you got a lot going on, basically.
Yeah.
Lots of ideas.
I try and keep myself busy as possible to keep myself focused and moving forward.
It's super exciting stuff to hear. Nathaniel, thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Thanks for having me. I would love to anytime.
Thank you very much for watching. You can check us out on gbhbl.com as well as on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and Tumblr. Go to Patreon and help us out over there. That's patreon.com/gbhbl, as well as Big Cartel, where you can find some of our merchandise. We have a podcast running on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts. And of course, if you like this video, do us a favour, hit the subscribe button and help the channel grow. Games, horror and heavy metal, what else is life for?